I'm Orestria, and these are my winter 2022 anime seasonal impressions. This season has all the anime. I was dropping 6 out of 10 shows because there were just too many other shows I wanted to watch. Which means you should be able to find something you like here. Pay attention to my find section, because there are a lot of shows that I dropped that I think are perfectly good shows if they just happen to be more to your taste. Shows are presented from worst to best according to my personal taste, and also grouped into Nope, Fine, and Recommended sections. I think shows in the Nope category are generally not worth your time. Shows in the Fine section can be really good, especially if they really feed into your particular preferences, and Recommended section is for shows I broadly recommend. Without further ado, I present to you the Nope category. The Nope category is for shows that I think aren't worth your time. They're typically so inept that even if they sound interesting, they're not. Sabihiro no Armor Reime. There are mercenaries living in a special hidden village. Maybe not so hidden since it gets attacked like 2 times in 2 days in the first episode. They have special weapons called armor. Yes, special weapons called armor. This is in a historical Japanese setting, so they are bringing magic guns to a sword fight. This is a decent setup, except you probably have eyes. This is another ugly CG show with characters that can't emote. I actually think it looks better than I expected based on the poster, though. But it's not just the appearance. The fight scenes have no sense of geography. You'll see 3 characters talking, and then the camera will change position, and the same 3 characters are suddenly surrounded. You'll see 2 characters in the village, and the next scene you see them, they're on a cliff and they're surrounded. People are just teleporting around. The enemies are endless, frankly, because I don't think anybody ever had a plan for how many there would be. They made a big deal about the enemies in the second attack being different than the ones in the first attack, but just watching the episode, I didn't notice a difference. The dialogue was painful, and the characters felt very stock. My favorite part of the episode was a 2-minute long live-action segment with the actors talking about the production and visiting real-life places associated with the history of the show. Genso Sangokushi Tengen Rei Shinki. A Chinese fantasy world where miasma creates demons, and gods actively meddle in mortal affairs to the point of showing up, bouncing boobs first, to force people into being heroes. I didn't manage to finish the first episode. The cold open was fine, and I think there's probably a decent story buried in here. They just kept adding characters at a breakneck pace without me knowing anything about them, and they had a really bad habit of centering the frame on characters' breasts, and those breasts often exceeded the size of their heads. There were also 2 instances of me saying, "Oh no!" to the CGI. I just think anything you could find here, you could probably find better somewhere else. Also, and this is a personal annoyance, but the subtitles were using their Chinese names and the audio was using their Japanese names, and I'm trying to listen to the Japanese, so it physically hurts. Dolls Frontline. In the future, wars are fought by combat robots. These combat robots, or dolls, are all made to look like women, and mostly dress in fetish wear. This is a delightfully silly concept, which unfortunately they've decided to try to play straight, and try to make it a serious tactical war story. And that's where they lost me. Like, you have silly hot girl in fetish wear combat robots. You should probably go for a more fun tone. If you take things seriously, it becomes really frustrated that they have big boobs and cat ears instead of camouflage. I wore these cat ears and I wasn't thinking about the fact that I was making fun of cat ears. The episode I watched was rather poorly edited. The cold open is an info dump that was really confusing. I actually thought I had missed something, which is a pretty awkward feeling to have in the first scene of the first episode. And later on, I figured out that my problem was the cold open was showing footage from a scene in the middle of the episode. The show emphasizes that these dolls are mass-produced, and in fact there are quite a few models where we see multiples, but the tension of the plot of the episode is how are these main girls going to get out of this situation, but if they're mass-produced and disposable, why should we care? I literally spent the entire episode trying to figure out if these were supposed to be some kind of special units or not. Just for fun, here are 2 examples of how poor the storytelling in this show is. Our girls find out that a high-end model is coming, and their reactions are like, oh shit, we're screwed. But when the high-end model shows up, it's super dark so you can barely see her. She's taken out immediately and easily. Then later, the show wants to make them threatening again. It shows them mowing down some friendly mooks. Also, what we see on screen rarely matches what we're being told. The characters will go on and on about how dire the situation is, but there's no visible evidence that that's what's happening. There was a scene where they're like, the 4 of us can't hold this location. We're going to send 2 of you off to go get help. Which means now there's just 2 people to hold the location they couldn't hold with 4. And this entire time, regardless of whether there were 4 of them or 2 of them, a grand total of 1 bullet ever came in through the window. There was no feeling of threat. I checked if this was a gacha game, and of course it is. So that explains the character designs. I still think that this show needed to pick a lane. If it was going to be serious, it couldn't go with these designs. Because of the gacha game, they're going to use the ecchi designs, so have some fun. You can't tell me you're a serious tactical show and then dress your girls like fetish dolls. Especially with the mooks being hentai versions of Shinra foot soldiers from Final Fantasy VII. I'll admit, this show might have potential to hate watch for the right person. Koroshi Ai. I was so excited for this. It's always exciting when an anime isn't about high schoolers, and here we have a romance anime about assassins. Assassins that don't go to school. God, that would have been perfect for me. Forgive me for including my tweet in the script, but I don't think I can word this better. This show is gross and misogynistic, and I hate it. It was creepy and awkward the whole time. If you change the music cues to change the tone, this would work better as a thriller than it would as a romance. The male assassin character is shown to be of a different level than our female assassin lead, and he uses his skills to threaten and force her into dating him even though she clearly has no interest in him. He takes out her targets for her as a gift, which is actually showing a total disrespect for her talents, even though the only reason he likes her is that she is 1, a woman, and 2, an assassin. This show takes an assassin woman, removes all her agency, and calls it romance. Barao no Soretsu. This is a story. I guess alternate history with some magical stuff, taking place during the War of the Roses in England. There's some gender-bending stuff, and I'm sorry my explanation of what's happening is vague, but my overall experience with this show was confusion. I felt kind of lost. I'll be the first to admit I'm not up on my British history, but given the intended audience is Japanese, I would assume they're not either. There were these moments where I felt very connected. I could connect to a character's grief, but most of the time I was just kind of floating through it. There was really cool imagery, but it wasn't animated. It was just still image pans. And I'm happy to watch a show like that, like Realist Hero later on this list. But if I'm not engaged in the story, these things get more noticeable. Actually, I think my biggest problem with this show was so anime characters often have this agelessness to them, right? Like, Prince of Tennis characters are 13 to 15-year-old, but some of them look like 30. And that was really hindering this show. I was having trouble keeping track of people's relationships because I would think a character was someone's wife, but then I would find out it was their mom, but the woman looked the same age as the person to me. It didn't look older than me. And everyone, I just had a wrong sense of everyone's ages. My overall impression was that the show was going for something artsy, but it just wasn't succeeding. Shikakumo no Saikyo Kensha. So the main character was a powerful saint in a world where people have crests that they are given at birth, and despite being the most powerful human alive and single-handedly defeating the demon threat, he couldn't achieve theoretical max power because he was born with the weakest of the 4 crests. So this guy reincarnates himself, although apparently it took like 1,000 years. And in the process of reincarnating, he somehow guaranteed himself to have the strongest crest. Sure. He has his memories of his past life, but for some reason still feels the need to go to magic school when he's 12, even though there's literally nothing he can learn about magic from these people. Especially since, in the 1,000 years between his lives, the world has forgotten everything about how to use magic, and now believe that the best crest is the worst crest. This is still all kind of silly, but not a deal breaker. However, things get worse. You see, he meets a girl. A girl he thinks is so gorgeous that he's immediately flustered by her appearance. She's his classmate, so she's 12. Remember, he has his memories from when he was a grown-ass man. Which means congrats, he's a pedo. This is demonstrative of the way this show doesn't think through its own logic at all. It's really painful watching him act like a socially awkward 12-year-old when he should be past all that. He has trouble talking to her, like, I don't have experience talking to people. And I'm belaboring the point, but did you never talk to people in your previous life? Also, in episode 2, he's perfectly fine talking to the king. So why is he flustered by a 12-year-old girl? There was one moment of hope that this show gave me, where it was revealed that the reason everyone has learned magic wrong is actually that some demons survived his thrashing 1,000 years ago, and they integrated themselves into human society and purposefully led humanity down the wrong route. This is more interesting than anything the show is actually doing. Like, imagine a Muno no Nana type situation where they have to go around and find out which people are secretly demons. But not. In the second episode, it's revealed that as soon as he defeated one demon, they all just fucked off, and now they're going to invade in a month, so he has a month to create a spell to defeat them, and even though he's this 12-year-old boy who defeated one demon, the king is happy to give him any and all resources that the country has, and all the resources that the country has are shit that he made in his previous life 1,000 years ago. Welcome to the fine section. If you're particularly interested in a genre or something about one of these shows, they can be really good. I think most of them have some problems, often pacing, that hold them back from greatness. Kenja no Deshi o Nanoru Kenja. I wanted to like this show. It was an MMORPG virtual world style show, and it was talking about the history that the players of the MMORPG had built up. The players created the cities. The players have fallen into this warrior meta. And they were talking about roleplay moments and showing the difference between the person playing the character and the character they created. And if the show focused on these things, I think it has really rich potential. But then it gets to a fight, and the CG monsters are really ugly, and I'm increasingly finding their storytelling method perplexing. They spend almost the entire episode talking about the world building and the meta, and the special saints who are the only magic people who are going against the warrior meta, only to have all the saints disappear, and our MC, who was one of the saints, is now a cute girl. And this new cute girl version spends the last few minutes of the first episode wandering around aimlessly, wordlessly. And, like, it's kind of a cool scene until you think about it too much. Why is his first reaction to suddenly being in a different body to stop and smell the roses? Why is he not asking people questions? I was planning on watching the second episode, and then I just kept procrastinating it until I realized clearly I've already dropped it deep in my heart. Tokyo 24-ku. This is a show with some interesting sci-fi stuff, if you can find it behind the local restaurant food festival competitions. There was this trio of friends who were inseparable in school until the girl they all liked dies, basically breaking the three up. One gives up on his childish dream of being a hero, one becomes a Banksy-esque graffiti artist, and one is very business and politics oriented. The first episode is a double episode which spends an awful lot of time doing nothing but talking about how close everyone used to be and the food at their other female friends' restaurant. Until suddenly they all separately get phone calls from their dead friend giving them a vision of the restaurant girl being killed. And the superhero guy got superpowers and they're all able to save her. And I'm thinking, alright, so the first part of the double episode was slow, but then the end was pretty cool, so now it's going to be good shit. Nah. About 90% of the runtime of the next episode is flashing back to high school without really shedding light on anything I hadn't already picked up about from the characters from the other storytelling. And some talk about a local market's restaurant competition. I think the show is trying to lean more on the interpersonal drama than the sci-fi stuff, but my personal experience is I do not care about these characters. I'm laser focused on the more interesting plot lurking in the background that you are ignoring. I'm perfectly happy with a slow life show or a show about interpersonal relationships, but if you dangle the idea of a more interesting show in the background and don't focus on it, it just drives me mad. It's the same problem I had with that Hero Pharmacy show from last season. Orient. This is a show set in Japan, but with an alternate history, where not only did demons appear and invade, but they basically won. And the Bushi, warriors who fought the demons, are now a shunned class in society. Our main characters are the son of one of these Bushi warriors and his best friend. They learned the true history from the boy's father, and they prepared their whole life to fight the demons. There's also some fun anachronisms like motorcycles. I spent the first half of the first episode being like, I don't know about this. And then the second half of the episode, I was like, holy shit. And then the first half of the second episode, I was like, I don't know about this. And the second half of the second episode, I was like, holy shit. But here's the thing. All the show has is Rule of Cool, with the motorcycles and the awesome demon designs. It doesn't have the kind of crazy animation or direction necessary to carry it on those things alone. Also, we're firmly in, it's not sexist as long as we have one female character, right? Territory. And the main character is like your standard action, super simpleton, willing to do dumb shit for honor. At some point I realized the main thing I liked were the demon designs, so I stopped watching. Shumatsu no Harem. I talked about this last time, so I'm not going to go into great detail. Basically, the first episode, despite the main goal clearly being ecchi, actually gave me a lot to think about, which is what good sci-fi should do. I enjoyed the mystery of the man-killer virus and the disappearance of the girl the main character likes. But not enough to watch it, considering that I would have to skip through half of the runtime of each episode. The second episode, as I had feared, focused almost entirely on bad characters and their terrible dynamics instead of the interesting stuff. I was pretty sure that's how it would go. I think someone could write a dissertation on the gender dynamics of this show. In particular, I was unnerved by one of the women assigned to be with the main character all the time in the hope that he'll sleep with them being a lolly who behaves childishly too. There was this real feeling of a man is going to save us, even though I'm sure female scientists have been working on it for years, so it was so fucked up that it actually looped back around to being funny. Basically, I just want someone else to watch this and make an interesting YouTube essay for me. Okay? Super Crooks. So, according to the description I read, this is a heist show about superpowered criminals in a world that also has superheroes. I didn't get that far, because I didn't make it through the first episode. The animation looks fine, but they're really not choosing the most imaginative angles or anything, which hurts because they chose the slowest, most bog standard way to start the show. Every little step of the discovering I have superpowers classic that we've seen a million times. I was bored to tears to the point of quitting, at which point Demonac informed me that there was a scene from the episode I was watching that went viral. So I went back and finished so I could watch that scene. And is that scene kind of funny? Yeah. Is it worth sitting through 15 minutes of boringness? No. Because you can just watch that one scene, like a bunch of people did, without any of the boring setup I sat through, and get the same level of enjoyment from it that I had, making every bit of the boring part worthless. It could be that the rest of the show is awesome. But there are a lot of good shows this season, and I'm not going to trust a show that was willing to waste my time in the first episode. Akebi-chan knows Sailor Fuku. Akebi lives in the middle of nowhere. She's literally the only kid in her grade. She's graduating and is going to be going to the same middle school that her mom had gone to. It's a bit of a commute, but she'll finally have classmates. Also, she's always wanted to wear a sailor-style uniform, like Sailor Moon, if you don't get the reference. The problem is, some time has passed since her mom was at school, and the school has actually changed to a more modern blazer-style uniform. But they found this out after her mom had already made the sailor-style uniform, so the school decides to allow an exception. So in addition to this being her first time ever having classmates, she now stands out like a sore thumb by being literally the only person in a different uniform than everyone else. This show is wonderfully animated. My favorite parts of the show were just Akebi running to school or running home with this beautiful animation that shows her pure joy. But overall, the show is just weaponized awkwardness, which is not my thing. Hakozume Koban, Joshi no Gyakushu. I basically just skimmed the description and checked the genre tags before watching the show. So I was pleasantly surprised when I realized that this show had 2 police women instead of just 1. Frankly, even 1 was exciting. This show is a non-isekai, non-school setting anime with adult female protagonists. I feel like I found a unicorn. This show isn't great. The animation and pacing are pedestrian. It's kind of hurt by a lack of continuing storylines. It's kind of slice of life, but you can't get comfy with it because it's a police station, so there's lots of upsetting things that happen. So it's really more of a drama. Honestly, I don't know what was gained by making this an anime instead of a live action. I watched all of this more out of an interest in Japanese culture, Japanese policing, and women in the workforce, more than anything the show was actually bringing by itself. Kaijin Kaihatsubu no Kuroitsu-san. This takes place in a Sentai, like Power Rangers, world. There are villains, they create monsters of the week, and the heroes defeat them. That said, it's a comedy, and the twist is that we're hanging out in the science labs of the villains as they deal with the crunch time of trying to get out a new monster each week, and that new monster has to somehow defeat the hero that won the previous week. This is a genius concept, but I found the first episode kind of slow and light on the jokes. There were a couple of good gags. Comedy's really subjective, so it could hit home for someone else. I'm also open to the idea that it gets better. I kind of felt bad about not watching more, but there were just too many other shows I was more interested in. Futsal Boys. This is, as far as I can tell, a totally standard shonen fujoshi baiting high school sports show. I've watched a lot of such shows. This one seems fine. Nothing really stood out about it. This show reminds me of Prince of Tennis, but like the first 24 episodes of Prince of Tennis, which are the worst episodes where it's slow as molasses and hasn't gone full ridiculous yet. I have seen the main character's special kick animation 3 times and laughed every time, and it's the same animation, and I hope I never stop laughing at it. It's glorious. Spinning back kick! This show really isn't bad, but there are just so many other shows I'm more interested in, and these shows need some kind of personality conflicts, but they felt extra forced here. And for me personally, the boys are like medium pretty at best, and they're kind of bland. And I'm not gonna watch some bland boys when literally everyone in Vanitas is gorgeous. And there's a better sports anime later on anyway.
そもそもフットサルのルールはちゃんと頭に入ってる？ボールを蹴る、シュート、ゴール!
Slow Loop. This is a cute girls doing cute fishing show, while also being a low-key, sweet family drama. I kind of feel bad that I'm not going to watch this, because the parts with the girls connecting and their families coming together were excellent, and I laughed out loud a couple of times. But I just can't with the fishing. The fishing parts made my eyes glaze over, and in the next episode preview it shows that they're going to school, and Is there anything worse for me to say about a show than next episode they're starting school? Don't make me go! Lideo no Daiichi Nite. Our main character was a hospitalized woman who played a lot of a particular VRPG and was a high-level player character there. Now her consciousness is stuck in the game, and somehow several hundred years in the future from the point where she played. It also appears she's the only player character around. But the show is not about figuring out what's going on, it's about her hanging out and getting in shenanigans. It's funny, but not, like, super funny. In fact, my biggest laugh was the fact that the barkeeper conveniently keeps an exposition poster around. Oh, how convenient! You have a fucking poster of it! The show also isn't chill enough to be like a slow life healing type show. I'm not big into motherhood. But I actually really enjoyed her being a mother, with her kids being adults. At the point where I jumped off, it seemed like there was no harem-y shit or even romance going on, which was cool. There were a lot of nice design elements in this show. I liked that I could see parts of the city that were going to come up later, so it felt like they had honestly planned it out. Ultimately, it just wasn't funny enough in this overstuffed season to keep me watching. But I did like a lot of what was going on. Tribe 9. I fucking love Danganronpa. So seeing a show by one of the main forces behind Danganronpa, with character art reminiscent of the game as well, got me excited. Despite there being baseball involved. In a world where vicious gang battles were replaced by extreme baseball, the Minatoku tribe are the best. We join a couple of new people getting recruited by the tribe, getting approved by the team's ace, and man, the home team's star player Kamiya looking like this guy from Danganronpa fucks me right up.
But sometimes, very rarely, two wrongs can make a right.
I talked about the wild parts of Prince of Tennis earlier, and the thing about that show is those parts are like visual metaphors. In this show, no, there actually is an anti-gravity wall, and that guy's bat is actually on fire. Unfortunately, this show really fell short of my hopes for it. I thought the first episode was absolutely great, and I was excited. But this show was a full roller coaster. Every episode I either loved it or hated it. And during the episodes when I hated it, I noticed another big difference between Tribe 9 and Danganronpa. Women. Danganronpa had a lot of female characters. Yes, part of that was to sexualize them, but they were there, and they had varied interests and interesting personalities. Tribe 9 has, at the point where I stopped watching, one named female character. There's also a henchwoman for the bad guys, and a bunch of prostitutes, and that's our female representation. I stopped when the one female character got kidnapped. And I read some comments for the next episode, and apparently in the next episode, someone walks in on her on a state of undress. Yay! Genshitsu Shugi Yusha no Kokusai Kenki, or Realist Hero, as I often call it. Another show that I've talked about before. This show is bad, and I like it. It's barely animated. A bunch of characters who are supposed to be very important never do anything. The most interesting things to come out of Season 2 were some consenting polyamory, super cringy plots about slavery, and refugees. It's not uncommon for entire episodes to just be exposition dumps. It's just the kind of show this is. I'm willing to bet the light novels are better, but if you're interested in this and haven't checked it out yet, wait, because this season we were blessed with a similar show that's better in every way, so I would recommend that instead. Sasaki to Miyano. This is a boys' love show set in high school in which a fudanshi, a guy who enjoys reading BL, meets an upperclassman, and then they slowly become more. Slowly. With constant aggressive sparkle effects. I'm a fujoshi, someone who specifically enjoys BL. And if this show weren't BL, I would have stopped because it is slow. But it is cute and decently well made, and it was very funny to laugh at the melodrama and the sparkles. Here's the thing. It's really rare for BL to get a TV anime. So even though I think this one is pretty unremarkable, it's probably in the top 5 TV anime BL. Also, I'm not surprised it's tame because it's just harder for gay content like this to get approved for the airways here in Japan. But yeah, if you're not a Fushoji or a Fudanshi, I don't think there's anything here for you. Sabikui Bisco. This takes place in a world post the fall of Japan. There are a few larger cities or settlements, but there's also vast desert. Major cities of our time like Tokyo have fallen, and there's a rusting wind that rusts not only metal, but also causes a rusting illness in people. There are a lot of cool details, well-crafted scenes, fun characters, and world building in this show. Yet somehow it disappointed me. I guess after the first 2 episodes, I expected more. Our main characters are a doctor with a resemblance to a panda that is never explained, and a mushroom keeper named Bisco. Good to know that Bisco cookies survived the apocalypse. There are fun action scenes and seriously some really cool world building. I got Nier vibes from some of it and Trigun vibes from other parts, but overall I just don't think it's that strong a show. It's definitely not a bad watch if you're in the mood and looking for something, but if you haven't seen Trigun, just watch that instead. It's way better. Vanitas no Kaate. I've talked about this show before, so I'm going to be real brief. It's steampunk, it's got alchemy, vampires, and pretty people of all genders. I think it works better as a binge watch than a week-by-week show. I also think maybe I liked Season 1 better than Season 2. Remen's Club. The show that begs the question, is Japanese corporate badminton really a thing? What? You see, Remen is short for badarimen, which is short for badminton salaryman. Salaryman being Japanese for businessman. This is not a shonen sports anime with like super attacks and shit. In fact, a lot of this show is about the businessman part, preparing reports, meeting with clients. Because of this, we get to see multiple sides of the characters, how they behave at work, how they behave in their free time, how they behave in practice, and then how they behave in matches. I think compared to that futsal show, this show isn't trying to be Fushoji bait, and yet it works better because instead of spending time hinting at it, it just has interesting characters, and the character models are way more attractive. Like, holy shit, when they're moving during matches, they are just hot. This show is fascinating to me for, like, all the wrong reasons. Do big Japanese companies have fucking badminton tournaments and hire employees as ringers? Do big beverage companies really have salespeople walking into individual supermarkets all the time to sell stuff? Is this the real life? Anyways, this was fun, but nothing revolutionary. It has an iguana. That's pretty cool. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Stone Ocean. A note, this is my first time watching a JoJo, and no, I don't plan on going back and watching previous ones. But in any case, if anything I'm saying makes you go, well, obviously it's JoJo, or she doesn't understand that it makes sense because of blah blah blah, from some previous season, now you know why. The first episode got me really excited because I thought this was going to be a Kill Bill-esque revenge story, which it's not. That doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, I think it's pretty good. It's just not what I wanted it to be. Jolene Joestar gets set up and sent to jail, and just in time discovers her stand, the method by which people in this setting have superpowers. If you're like me, you knew what a stand was because of JoJo memes. And there's a reason for all the memes. This show really is a visual assault. Always choosing the presentation method that is the most. If you're not prepared to have people yelling all the time, don't watch. This show operates by setting up an insane situation using stands, making some music puns, Jolene figuring out an ingenious way to solve the problem with her stand, which is emphasized by an amazing music sting. And since the setting is a women's prison, that means that we have lots of female characters living their imprisoned lives and chasing their own goals. Did this show change my life? No. Is it good? Yeah. Tensai Oji no Achi Kokka Saisei Jutsu. This is basically Realist Hero, but better in every way. It has an overarching plot, it handles its characters better, has better animation, and a better treatment of women. Our main character is the prince of a small, poor nation. He's a brilliant strategist and incredibly selfish. His goal is to raise the profile of his nation enough that he can sell it off and retire somewhere and live in recumbent wealth. The main character has more of a personality than the guy from Genjutsu. In fact, in the first episode, I found him really whiny and annoying. As you get to know him better, that's pared down, and you see more sides of him as well. The show also does away with any isekai elements. This guy isn't smart because he comes from a world with more advanced education theories. He's smart because he's smart, and he does his homework and physical training too. Instead of a harem of wives like we have in Genjutsu, we get a retainer who's been his best friend since childhood, who is his confidant and his protector. He has some suitors for political reasons, and his little sister, who might be one of the few people he actually cares about. Many of his intellectual sparring partners over the course of the series are women. I didn't write a conclusion for that. Cool. So yeah, if you're really into like fantasy world building or like politics between nations, check this out. Princess Connect Redive. This is an isekai where our hero has had much of his memories erased, and the process seems to have left him with some change to his mental processing. He meets some friends and they create a gourmet guild, an adventurers guild whose main goal is to eat yummy things. Rather than being super powerful himself, he has the power to give a huge boost to other people's powers. Specifically girls, because this is an ad for a mobile game. There's a certain type of show, slice of life stuff, light comedy, where I'm more likely to keep watching because it's the perfect thing to watch when I eat dinner. The status quo tends to be maintained, and it makes for really reliable, comfortable watching. Season 1 of Princess Connect was firmly in that category. It's even about finding and eating food. It had interesting character designs and generally nice animation. And I fucking love Carol as a character. Season 2 not only seems to have significantly increased the animation production value, but it took a show where I thought things would always be returned to a status quo and actually advanced the plot. I can't think of another show I've seen where I thought it was just a happy vibes show and then it actually did the thing. This is a pretty good show. Its biggest weakness is that because it's an ad for a mobile game, it's obsessed with constantly adding new characters. Sometimes like 5 new characters per episode. And it just kind of expects you to remember them, apparently. That said, Season 2 wants me to ship Carol and Pecorin, and, alright. Fantasy Bijoujo Juniku Oji-san to. This is the story of 2 businessmen who've been friends since childhood. One of them, Jinguji, is so perfectly capable and popular with women for reasons that elude me that he's beyond human. The other guy, Tachibana, exists. Tachibana is also drunk, and while Jinguji is helping him stumble home, he complains and wishes he were a beautiful woman so he could experience the kind of attention they must get. Because in this moment, the goddess of beauty from a fantasy world hears his plea and grants his wish, transporting both of them to her world in order to defeat the Demon King. This is a rom-com about 2 male friends trying not to fall in love now that one of them looks like a gorgeous woman. This should not work. This should be so painful. Maybe to people who aren't rotted fujoshi with an interest in gender issues, it's unwatchable. I don't know. But I love this. I was excited for every new episode. There's definitely some Japanese sexism on display, but it didn't get too bothersome for me. Also, since toxic masculinity, although they don't use the term, ends up being a noticeable plot issue, it kind of makes me forgiving. And lo, we arrive at the recommended section, which despite there being many good shows this season, there's only one great show. Sono Bisque-doll wa Koe o Suru. My favorite anime of the season is the high school rom-com. Sometimes you read the plot description of an anime and it sounds amazing, and you watch it and it's bad. Sometimes you read a plot description for an anime and it sounds absolutely bog standard, and then you watch it and it's presented and crafted so wonderfully that it's great. This is the latter. Gojo lives with his grandpa or uncle, I forget, who makes Hina dolls. Dolls for a Japanese festival that happens each March. They make them in the traditional style, painting their faces by hand, making their clothes. Their home and their store are all one building. This boy doesn't do anything but go to school and try to learn the craft of making Hina dolls. He loves them and wants to follow in the family business. He also has basically no friends. In large part because as a child, some girl made fun of him for liking dolls, and so he keeps this part of himself secret from everyone. And it's hard to make friends if you're constantly hiding the most important thing in your life from everyone. Meanwhile, there's this radiant, popular girl in his class, the kind of person he would never even think of trying to speak to. So different in her interests and life experiences from him that they're practically a different species. She discovers that he knows how to sew, and she reveals that she's trying to make a cosplay of a character she loves from a porn game, and a wonderful relationship begins. I mean, what girl hasn't dreamt of meeting a boy who can make cosplay for her? This show has some ecchi elements, which I was mostly okay with because usually it's Marin purposefully being sexy, or at least always being comfortable with her body. There were some scenes I was less happy with, and the camera is definitely going there, but still. Also, this show really takes the time to develop the characters and make you really like both of them. Marin is this free spirit who drags Gojo out of his stagnant life, and Gojo is a steadying force that supports her. The animation is good, the jokes land, and it's fun. For Best Girl, my runners-up are Lit, the in-girl from Leadale that, for reasons I do not understand, made me squee every time she was on screen. And the ever-optimistic and surprisingly kind Marin from Sono Bisque Doll. She seems like the popular girl who wouldn't give you the time of day, but she's happy to talk with anyone. Not ashamed to let her cool friends see her with her not cool friends. But I mean, my best girl is Carl. It's Carl again. It'll probably be Carl anytime Princess Connect is in the season, although I'm not really expecting a season 3. Carl is one of my favorite anime characters in recent memories. She has a gothy, witchy, catgirl appearance. She's a tsundere, but it doesn't feel like that's the only element to her character. And it doesn't feel like her entire existence is designed to fit that trope. It's more like someone took the trope and grew a character out of it. Unfortunately, explaining in any much more detail would involve spoilers. As for Best Boy, I don't really have a Best Boy for this season. I don't even have any runners-up. I'm not saying that I hated all the guys, more that they were functional to their stories but didn't really excite me. I'm going to default to Gojo from Sono Bisque Doll, mostly because he and Marin are an amazing couple. He's dedicated, hardworking, and considerate, maybe a bit of a pushover. Marin is very free and outgoing, and they just really help each other, and they're amazing together. Now it's time for the non-binary trans shoutout. These are all characters who buck gender norms, at least from the episodes I saw of the shows I watched. My favorite part of Kaijin Kaihatsu Bu no Koroitsu-san was that they made this wolf kaiju, and for 95% of its development, they were making it male. It was doing mental training as a male in a male body, and at the last minute, their boss came around and changed the design to be a sexy female body, giving the wolf serious gender dysphoria. I was tempted to watch more of the show just because I was interested in this one character. There's Tachibana from Bijoujo Fantasy, where he's literally a man in a woman's body. The show has a lot of interesting commentary about gender, so if you're into that, like me, it's worth a watch. Barao no Soretsu's main character was either born a woman or intersex, I'm not sure. He was raised a boy and named Richard. Well, that was a fine season. Kind of funny that my favorite show of the season is a rom-com, since there are a million of those coming out in the spring season. You can check my Twitter for my spring first impressions, and after the season, I will see you next time. Bye-bye. I spent 3 hours finding this Prince of Tennis footage, only to cut the scene where I actually needed it.
Here, have a taste of my extra-dimensional tennis!
More Prince of Tennis comes out next season. Do 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 do. Dun 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 dun. Meow meow.